It is time to flip the script on disability. For too long, society has viewed disabilities as weaknesses or limitations of individuals rather than barriers created in society. At least that is what the social model of disability argues. The social model of disability really challenges a lot of our long-standing assumptions about disability and how we think about it. And so in this video, we're going to talk about a few things. First, we're going to discuss the medical model of disability. Then we're going to talk about the social model of disability and conclude with some reflections and thoughts about how you might take what you learned from this video and use it in your day-to-day lives. So first, what is the medical model of disability? The medical model of disability is most associated with the thought that disabilities are deficits that can be corrected through medical intervention. And so in the medical model, if something happens, let's say someone has a spinal cord injury, the person will look at the spinal cord injury as the problem and attempt to figure out a cure to allow that person to come back into normalcy. So as an example, when I was talking with a psychiatrist, I remember her saying something to the effect of, I don't want to diagnose autism right away because that does not have a treatment. Instead, let's look at some things that do have treatments. And so in that moment, the question of what was the right or the correct diagnosis slipped into a question of what is or is not treatable. And now I know that psychiatrist was just trying to help, improve the quality of my life. But in that slippage, we see how the medical model defines correcting something or curing something as kind of the goal. Now, the social model of disability critiques and diverges from the medical model in at least two ways. First, the social model includes an emphasis on society, norms, and environments in addition to just the individual. You don't just look at the individual to determine whether or not disability is at play. Second, the social model does not view disability in and of itself as the problem or as an individual's problem. Rather, the social model encourages us to look at the ways in which social norms, built environments, perpetuate barriers that make it harder for people who have particular diagnoses or disabilities to live. And so the social model shifts the conversation away from just the individual and towards questions of how inclusive and accessible is society writ large. Let's take a classic example. The social model suggests that having to use a wheelchair is not the problem unless a building is constructed in a way that requires you to walk or requires you to use stairs. So let's imagine there's a city council meeting that's happening, and that council meeting is happening in a place that you cannot get to via a wheelchair. The problem is not that the person has to use the wheelchair. The problem is that the meeting is happening in a place that is inaccessible. And so the goal in that instance shouldn't be to teach that person how to walk or get that person to walk again, rather to get people to understand how social practices are excluding people from participating. With the social model, the goal is fixing the social exclusion rather than curing the individual. One disability advocate, Stella Young, put it this way in her TED Talk. She said that disabled people are more disabled by our societies than our bodies and our diagnoses. And I'm going to link Stella's TED Talk in the description below, and I really encourage you to check it out. But that phrase about how people are more disabled by societies than diagnoses really highlights the social model of disability because it focuses on social exclusions rather than the disability or diagnosis itself. Now, when we think about the social model of disability, it has a few implications for how we might go about living our lives. First, it encourages us to continually think about barriers to access. Many of us who walk might not notice a place is inaccessible because it requires stairs, but we can take time to notice things like that. We can take time to think about our built environment and our social norms and ask ourselves who is included or excluded from this place or from this practice. Sometimes this has meant holding meetings at a coffee shop rather than at an office because the coffee shop was a lot more physically accessible than the office. Second, we should celebrate accommodations at school and at work. We might not always know why someone has an accommodation. For example, we might not know why a student requires additional time to take their test. We might not know why someone requires more sick days than others. And we might not know the status of someone's mental health. And they might not always be comfortable sharing that information with us. Regardless, we can affirm and work to support people who require accommodations at school and at work by doing things like simply listening and doing the accommodation rather than pushing back and asking why they require an accommodation. And we can also think about ways that we can just make work and school more accessible. A part of that is maybe trying to figure out how to use and support inclusive technology at work and in the classroom and even in your personal life. When you can use it and it does not take away from others, use that assistive technology. For example, you can use closed captioning on your televisions at home even if you don't require them, because doing so shows that there's support for that assistive technology. Finally, I've often found that a lack of awareness is a key issue when it comes to disability and also neurodivergence. To address that, you can organize things like trainings at your work or at your school about disability. You can share videos like this with others who may not know as much about disability, or you can also increase your awareness about disability and other issues by following disability rights advocates on social media. And you can also check out my next video, which focuses more on neurodivergence. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good one. Until next time.